Well, welcome to 360 Yield Center. It's a pleasure to have you step in and take a look at the different technology. You know, most of my design team are farmers, and as farmers ourselves, we're always looking for better opportunity. What are things that we can do that are simple, cost-effective, and raise yields? So I look at the planter that's sitting over here, and you can see we at 360 do a lot of banding of nitrogen. And we talk about starter and dashes. And you look down at the bottom of that row unit, and you see a new closing technology called Wave that does starter and envelopes soil over the seed. These are things that make quite a difference. At the far side of the tent, we got a lot of harvest technology where that goes in your corn head as yield saver and chain roll. And then, of course, we got the ripper points. But out here behind me, we have a completely new way to farm, and we have introduced into you 360 Rain. And so 360 Rain came to be, we were saying, what are ways that you and I can take a giant step ahead in yield and managing inputs? I think as growers, every one of us would say through the summer, we always have a 3-week dry period where corn goes under stress. And at the end of the day, corn can never have a bad day. So you and I's job is, no matter what nature gives us, can we control that environment around it? So as 360 came to be, it was all about what can we do in the field to take away stress. We understand, don't we, where yield comes from. So it's all about stress, and we take it away. And we know corn has a tremendous capability to yield. I plant the same numbers that Dave Hewlett planted that made 616 bushel. And so when we think about yield, it comes down to 3 areas on different hybrids. And early on, we talk about an ear setting how many rows around it's going to be. Is it going to be 18 or 16? And that's all early in that plant's life. We're talking corn this tall, V5. It's saying, am I happy or not? Stress corn then, knocks off some rows. It's 10 bushel for every row around. And so when I think about 360 Rain, it's going to be living in the field. We're going to talk about, after we talk about yield, how does it run and what's its feature? The second thing that happens through the mid-season is kernel length. How long, how many kernels does that ear have on it? Once again, we'll see what? We'll pollinate 44, 46 long many times. I'll go in the field early and I say, man, we got 44 pollinated. Now how are we going to hang on to them? And the minute you and I go through a stress period in the growing season, we start taking them off. Very common to harvest 38, sometimes 36. And if every kernel in length's worth 6 bushel to you and you tell me you're losing 6, well, that's 36 bushel right off the top. And then it comes down to depth of kernel. That's this time of year. You take a day like today at home, I'm excited. We had 1 1/8 inch last night. Anywhere from 1 inch to 1 1/8 inch. And so we got plenty of moisture. We got brilliant sunshine today, don't we? And that plant at this stage of its life is adding kernel depth, size, and weight. And it's a huge number. The days that we have from here to harvest are going to make a really, really good crop or just an average crop. And so it's all about the size of this kernel. Now, some hybrids do this easier than others. What I found is the high-yielding hybrids are also the ones that you stress them. In the last 3 weeks, I just talked to some growers here. And they said, the last 3 weeks we haven't had any rain and we need a rain. And they're on the Indiana-Illinois line. They said on the new drought map that come out, we're in that drought map. What are they really saying? Their kernel size and weight is probably going to be diminished. And that's exactly why we started to say, can we design technology that's very simple, but take the difference? Let me give you the difference here. So when we started out at 360 Rain, I told our team, I'm excited when I can add 10 bushel to you on a planter technology. That gets me going. But I told our team, I said, we're looking for 50 bushel. A 50 bushel step ahead is what I'm looking for. And I realize it's there. Because we've been bumping our farm 250, 260 field averages. I'm not raising 300 bushel field average. I raise 300 bushel corn. All of us raise 300 bushel corn. You go through, you see the yield monitor going what? 335, 338. And then at the same pass, you see some 185, 178, Those are what we're talking about. How do we take the valleys, raise the peaks and raise the valleys up? Well, this is where it happens at this stage. So 90,000 kernels is what the USDA's number is. So when you and I go out and do kernel counts, you take rows around times the number of ears times the kernels long, and you divide it by 90, the standard. But if you and I know that we could have a kernel that only 72,000 fill a bushel basket, what's the difference there? It's huge. That difference is 59 bushel right here. So when you and I talk about raising tremendous corn, it comes from the end of the season, in the August time frame, and in that first half of September. What are the things that we can do? So we set out and we said, what if we can design a very simple system and irrigate? You can see us up there. We're putting 1/1500ths of an inch on in a band right next to the root system. Because over the years, I've seen what Y-drop can do on a sprayer. Once we started figuring out we could put nitrogen on top of the ground at the right time in the right place of corn, we saw yields explode, and we saw nitrogen use come down and yields go up. Anytime where our dollars spent go down and the yields go up, I'm in. That's things that we talk about all the time at our house and our family. Say, well, how do we lower inputs and raise yields? And so being in the irrigation side, where we have pivots and I have drip irrigation, I got both. And I understand a lot about both. And I said, if we're going to design, because I believe water is the key, but I said, if we're going to come out with water, there's some things that we're going to have to satisfy. One is, we can't ask growers to have and come up with as much as 1,000 gallons a minute. If you go across the Corn Belt, that's just not possible. Now at home, where I live, I can get 1,100 gallon a minute well. 16-inch casing, 100-horse motor, I can get 1,100 gallon out of the ground. But there's a bunch of us here in this ground that can't get anywhere close to that. So the number one requirement says whatever we design, it's got to require a low amount of water per minute. It could either be surface water or it can be an 8-inch well, not a 16-inch well, to lower the cost. And the main thing we said is it's got to be any shape of field. So in other words, not all of us have 160-acre square field. So let's talk about what shape of field. So wouldn't it be nice if every field was like this that we farm? But that's not reality. Many, many of us have these type of shape of fields. And there's no way a pivot works. I got 92 acres at home that looks like this. 3/4 mile long and narrow. How would you put a pivot on that? And it needs a pivot. It's a really heavy black ground. If I put a pivot on it, we could take yields or seed corn into this field. You can't put a pivot on a narrow field. So I challenged our team and I said, no matter what shape of field, the grower has to be able to use this technology. So when I look at 360 Rain, and you see it here, it follows the planter pass. We're going to put on the center of your planter receivers and RTK, accelerometers and all that, so we know the roll of the ground. And wherever you plant, we're going to follow you. Wherever 360 Rain goes, it's laying hose and it's picking hose up. So right now, we're on the 50-yard line, we call it. Let me draw it for you, what a 50-yard line is. Let me do a square field. It'll be a little easier to understand. We talk about a square 160. So you can put your well out here at the edge of the road if you wanted to, so your nitrogen tanks are close to fill. And then we're going to make a 50-yard line in the center of that field. And you're going to have a hydrant out there just like you see here. And so the rows are planted this way. They're planted going north-south. And so we're going to leave this center, just like you're seeing here, we're leaving the hydrant, and we're going to go out and we're going to jump onto this end, and we're going to go towards the road. And when we get all the way out here to the ditch bank, we're going to then back up, picking hose up. So for the last several years, we've been using this technology. I'm putting about 1,700 to 1,500ths on each pass. So on the way out, I'm putting 1,700ths on in a band. I'm not spreading it across 1,700ths per acre. But in the band, though I do 2 passes, what is that, 3/400ths of an inch? What is that in reality? You got to double it. That's about 6,800. So what the actual plant sees is double that amount. So I'm going to band it for a reason. You know, we run our pivots at home in corn. What are we actually doing to that corn in a day like this right now? When I hit that with 55-degree water, what do? I shut that plant down. So if we could just water at night, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But we have to water during the sunshine. We shut that plant down, and for the rest of the day, you're no longer, the vacuum pumps stop running, and you're no longer sucking up nutrients and water. So if we can put it at the base of the plant, we got the best of all worlds. We got the leaf hitting brilliant sunshine on it, just like it's hitting my arm, and the vacuum pumps are running, and then we're using water to carry the nitrogen because we're going to add nutrients in the water stream. So that's a 3-inch line. There's 3,000 feet on that machine. So I can do now 160 acres from corner to corner, 100%. If this was 160 acres with a pivot, how many acres? I got 32 acres I can't water. It's on the corners, and you can't get it. So when I said if we're going to jump into watering, we're going to make it so that 100% of the field can get water. And so this machine just left the 50-yard line. It's going to go a quarter-mile north till it hits the ditch bank. It's going to back right up, take its hind end towards the hydrant, and then what's it going to do? It's going to turn to the south. And it's going to do those 24 rows or 48 rows. We're going to have 60-foot booms and 120-foot booms. Depends on the topography of your ground, how much roll you have. But you're going to see that we're going to be able to water right at the base of that plant. And so as you see it here, it's going to come back and forth, and it's just going to run. And it's just going to follow exactly where the planter went. Our goal is to do 160 acres in 5 days with a ½ inch, or the plant sees an inch a week. And we're going to run every week, and we're not going to stop. You realize the day the corn out here in this field are pulling up 1/4 inch of water every day, just sucking water up. So you're not going to overwater. I'm not going to get behind. I watch with interest my neighbors at home. So we're in the seed corn business, and a lot of us have good black flat ground, but we got water. Pivots don't start in my area until the corn's rolled tight and it's 98 degrees and there's no forecast of rain in the water in the future. You don't want to get behind. So in this strategy, I'm just going to run. This becomes a plant butler. It lives in that 160 acres all of its life. The day after planting, it's sitting there just like a border collie is, looking to get a hold of a steer. And he's just saying, what do I need to do? Well, if we just had planted it, let's say we planted it Monday and the day's Wednesday. Last night I got 1.8 of rain home. And we crusted that corn in. What would you do if you owned rain? Well, you'd run it. Let's just say right here in this soil type, it really crusts. Let's just pretend it's 28 acres. What would Gregg do if we just planted this 4 days ago and now I have a crust? And I say, well, we have a choice. We can live with less plants, we could rotary hoe, or I would bring rain in. And I would come in here and I would water just that polygon, that soil type, with 4/10. And I'd water corn up. And I might do that the first week. And so I'm going to have rain in the field at any given time. And it'd be no different if you told me, you said, well, we got some kind of a problem in young corn. We're going to take care of it. We're going to have that feasibility. So those are things that we talk about. So it's a very simple system, all-wheel drive. It's electric, DC motors. I got a battery bank on the other side. That little gen set that you see there is charging the batteries. And it's extremely efficient. We're really fortunate to find this kind of technology. A 300-gallon fuel tank will run that for 25 days. So at the end of 25 days, I've got intelligence. I'll know about when it's running out of fuel. Am I going to stop by the hydrant in the center, or am I going to stop out by the road? I'm going to stop out by the road and wait for you. And you're going to come, and you're going to fill it, and you're only going to fill it probably, what, twice a season? That motor's designed that you only change the oil once a year at the end of the season. It's got a 4,000-hour warranty on it. So those kind of things get me excited. So it's got a 24-volt system, and it's going to charge the batteries. And the batteries get full, the genset shuts off. And so right now I've added some extra batteries so the genset never runs during the show, and I can run the full day, 10 hours, and I got plenty of power left. So we also got a wire option. We got a 3,000 foot of wire on a reel, and we lay the wire from the hydrant where the high power is all the way with the hose out 3,000 feet if we need to. And so the wire reel is also an option. Now that's going to cost more than the diesel set, but at the same time it's an option if you want to be on grid. The costs look pretty unique. So for grid power, about $4 an acre for the year, and that's running 10 passes. So if you ran for 10 weeks solid at 2 to 4 kilowatt, we're looking at about $4 an acre for that 160. If you're on diesel power at $2.50 fuel is where I'm buying mine, that would be what? $8.60 a year. But the cost is less on the initial purchase, that it really becomes pretty obvious to me that the diesel is probably the way to go. And so those are things that'll be there. And those are things that we can work on. We talk about a 50 bushel step. Is it possible? And so as you look up there, I'll write some numbers down for you. A year ago, so in 2020, last season, we watered 12 times. So 12 weeks we watered, and I put on 4.75 inches of water out of 12 passes, okay? And we took some stress on. We had a 3-week period before tasseling. My corn rolled up, and it was hot, 95 degrees. I think we had 5 days at 94, 95. Not a long period. We had some really nice rains before that. Then we had that stretch in there, and then we got some nice rains again. So we were in there, and we were putting down 3,500s about each pass. So 1,700s on the way out, 1,700s on the way back. And we added 65 bushel. And you say, well, what in the world did 65 bushel come from? So we had 200 bushel corn, and we had 265 when we averaged all the 8 replicated strips through this field. Well, it came out of kernel depth. I could see it. It came out of kernel depth, and it came out of kernels blowing off the tip. I saw as much as 110 bushel response on a half-mile strip. Now, some strips outperform others. It's all due to soil types. But at the end of the day, after 2 years, we're looking at 51 bushel average. And you look at that and you say, I don't know, Greg, is that real or is it not? And I'm excited about it because I can watch the corn and I can see how it responds. And I'm walking in those cornfields, and I believe it's a real number. So it's about you and I being able to manage the environment that we're in. You say, well, what about beans? So if I have this on 160 acres in year 2, do I need to move it? Well, I'm watching with interest, because I do a lot of stuff with beans, and I usually tell you the numbers scare me. You know, we do nitrogen or starter, or we do sulfur on beans, and, you know, Purdue is saying you get 10 bushel bean yield by putting sulfur on Y drop, and I'm like, we've tried it, and I don't see it. So I see 14.5 bushel up here on the bean trials. Once again, replicated 8 times through this field. We saw where did that come from? In my opinion, it comes from early planting and early stress. Let me give you an example. So you look up there, you see pods touching the ground. When will those beans planted? April 5th. So we come in, we start early. So last year we started on April 2nd. This year we didn't get started till the 5th. I was concerned we were late. I said, what the world? It took forever to get us going. Why are we planting early beans? Well, it's all about night length. Earlier you can plant. And I'm to the point, I've done it 4 years running, I'm no longer scared of snow, freeze, rain. If I have to replant, I have to replant. Because the yields are big. 12 to 15 bushel for early planting. Say over May 20th. Pick an imaginary date. It's real. It's all about night length. Let me draw it out for you. The shortest night of the year is when? 6/21. June 21st, solstice happens, the shortest night. If we plant up here on April 5th, the night length is long enough, those plants start to flower. If they flower early, where the pods set, right where my finger is at ground level, those pods were hitting the ground. So my deer head is probably not going to get them all. But if we stress that, and what I saw last year is where the rain unit dry strips were, those bottom pods fell off when it got really hot and dry, and we had pods 6 inches off the ground. Where we were watering, we held on to them. Now, it's a theory. It's Gregg. It's not there's no science here. It's not like I had a university out there documented. But I'm excited for what I see. Will that 14 bushel hold? I don't know. It did last year and the replications, and it was real, so it's something that's out there. So I look at this picture of 9 different things, and I just pick some random things. And so obviously we can water corn up. How much population you should plant, you and I can talk about. Do we need to drop 40,000 in the really heavy ground? Do we need to drop 31,000 in the light ground? Well, obviously, I can slow this up and speed it down. I'm going to run my pump 100%. If I'm running 100%, I can get about 220 gallon a minute to 215. I'm never going to stop my pump out of the well. I'll just speed up or slow down my machine. If I'm coming through a wet area that doesn't need any water, I'm going to speed up. I'm running 3.5 inches a second. Usually we're running about 6 inches a second. I'll go to 9 inches a second, 12 inches a second. We'll just roll through there. I won't shut the pump off. I might shut the nitrogen pump off if I needed to. All that's in control. We talk all that. Cell service and 900 megahertz radio, we can talk back and forth to the well. And so those are things that are there for us to think about. So as I look at that picture, obviously nitrogen is a no-brainer. Our program will be 60 units with Bandit. So I'll put 60 units on the planter. I don't ever want to have a bad day early. And then as soon as rain starts running, we'll start running 16 units down. In our case, with dairy and hog buildings, we're going to start running manure down. And that's something we'll talk about here. How do we run manure through this system? We got the whole country lit up on the livestock side. That picture in the center of the sprayer, the guy in the sprayer, I can't wait to get a rain unit that can handle direct inject, fungicide, herbicide, insecticide. My spray time has got to go down in our operation. We're running sprayers every day. 750 hours we put on sprayers at our operation. We've got to cut that down. So I'm looking for this to become a direct inject. No problem to carry a tank of active ingredient. I got all the water in the world coming to me. Put a secondary boom on, nozzles on the boom, a drop every row of undercover, 360, and we're off to the races. And so those are things that are there. How about this though? Fungicides. We spray all of our corn with fungicide. I put a picture up of this year of our farm. I'm not very proud of this. So we got tar spot for the first time. How many of you ever heard of tar spot? Know what it is? That'll take your breath away because it'll get you quick. So all of our fields are treated with Deloro, 8 ounces, 16 gallon of water. And after we sprayed, we started to see tar spot hit. That corn on the left was just a little 2-acre triangle on the other side of a waterway, and we never took the Hagee over there and sprayed it. I'm glad we did this, because 100% of our acres are sprayed except for that 2 acres. And I'm telling you guys, tar spot is taking it out. I walked in it last Friday night, and I couldn't believe it. It's actually going to kill it. That ear is going to have to be 60 bushel less than the corn that was sprayed with fungicide across the ditch. It still has tar spot. This hybrid is very susceptible. I'll agree to that. And so it's concerned. So you and I, of tar spot, are going to have to get really good at picking hybrids. Because I don't think there's any fungicide that I'm aware of right now that's labeled to kill tar spot. They have tar spot on their label, but they're not able to handle it. It is very, very aggressive. So it's something that's out there. What about cover crops? Our vision is, and I'm going to work on it this fall, and I'm getting late, and I get home, I got to start on it. I want to mix up cereal rye in that tank, keep it agitated, then I want to start injecting it into the water stream. My goal is to put 17 to 20 pounds an acre on the way out. On the way back, we water it in. I'm going to change the drops so it's a flat fan. So I'm going to do from row to row the whole surface. I'm no longer going to be banding. We're going to make a quick exchange drop. So if we can start cover crops 4 weeks ahead of harvest, and we can water it in versus an airplane that comes over our high population fields, and I'm not sure how much seed ever hits the ground. It gets a lot in the whirls. My goal is, if carbon guys want to pay us money, I'm all in. But they do pay us by what? They pay us by measurement. They come out and drop a tape in and they say, oh, you are going to get $7.80 an acre for the amount of cover that you're able to raise. So we look at rain as being an early seeding device that can make a difference. So it's something we're watching and working on. The very bottom right there is all about hog manure and cattle manure. And like I said, the industry has lit up. Because regulation, whether we like it or not, Minnesota right now has a law. You can't apply any manure until it's below 50 degree soils, and you can't apply any on frozen ground. You know how long that is in Morris, Minnesota? About 2.5 weeks. The farm up there that we were pretty good friends with, work with, they have 110 million per dairy, and they got 10 dairies. 110 million to put on in 2.5 weeks. Will not happen. That's impossible. So we're saying, what if? Not pump solid manure. Let me give you an example. So we have finish houses. Those finish houses hold about 1.2 million gallon. And so we put on anywhere, let's just use a number, 5,600 gallon per acre with the drag line, okay? This is gallon per acre, and that happens October 1st, sometimes the last week in September. These seed fields come off pretty early, and so we're out there and we're using a drag line on that. So we know that we're going to go 10x passes to 12 passes a year. Let's just use 10, because I can do math in my head. Why wouldn't I put manure in at 560 gallon per acre every pass? My analysis on this finished manure, it's 240 pounds of nitrogen when I put it on at the drag line in the fall. How much do you think my agronomist gives me credit for? 120 next spring. Why? Because it disappears. And so if you told me I could figure out a way to get 100% of the value out of those hog barns, we got 3 of them there. We cover about 650 acres with them. If I can start to do that in growing crop, because the minute I put 10%, I'm liable to get invited to the neighborhood picnic. Probably not, but the smell goes dramatically down because of dilution. You go in and put hog manure on, and then my phone lights up every year. The texts start coming, man, your buildings really stink. And I'm like, yeah, they're gonna stink for a week here. And so we're all about saying for the dairies and beef pits and hog pits, can we figure out a way? And we believe we have. So we came up with a manifold system. The first thing we did this year, we put dairy and hog manure in this style of boom. Well, you can see all the right angles. You can see all the fittings. How long do you think it took us to clog that machine? About 5 seconds. It actually, I was watching Tim, and I saw it blow the boom apart right there as it come off the machine. I saw water, manure, and I saw Tim doing this, and I thought we probably ought to shut down. And so we're going to redesign. We're building a manifold. And the manifold's going to have a chopper in it. Since this is a DC machine, it's no problem for me to put a DC motor, and we're spinning that blade 5 times a second past the opening. And so the dairy manure is no different. My dairy, we have sawdust for our freestall, so all the manure had sawdust, and it clogged coming right around that corner, hitting the PVC, and it just locked tight. So we said, let's take this manifold. We took it to the dairy pit. You can see my large pit there, and we're pumping, and I couldn't get it to clog. And I said, well, even with the propeller off. So I dumped sawdust in that line. I put 4 feet of sawdust, pure sawdust in the line. We pumped that into the manifold while it's running, and it shut it off without the blade running. The minute I started the blade running, she freed up, and you can see it here. You can see it pulsating, and you're going to see it running right there. You can see it. It's five times a second. It's pulsating, and you can see that. So I'm excited where I think manure can take us, and I think that's going to be a really good step. So a lot of questions that I get. How many acres can it do a day? What's the biggest field it can do? And all those different types of things. So we're going to do what? 33 acres a day at a 1/2 inch. About the max we can do is 160 acres. 160 acres is going to take 2,600 feet of hose. Our machine has a capacity of 3,000. So there's possibilities we can maybe, on the right shaped field, get up to 200. It's just going to slow you down because we're only going to be able to pump 215 to 225 gallon per minute through that 3-inch hose, okay? So I don't know why I just don't write GPM. And so that's at 115 PSI on your pump. 8-inch well, 6-inch pump. This is casing. This is pump. And it's designed to run 115 PSI. You can do surface water. You can do lakes, lagoons, creeks, rivers. When I go to Iowa and Minnesota, I got a farmer in Iowa right now. He's got 6 hog buildings. One building next to it is old and it's empty. That pit holds 1.2 million gallons on that old building, okay? What's he going to do? He's going to pump manure and water into that holding pit, and we're going to pump the rain unit out of the old building that doesn't have any hogs in it. And we're going to fill it full of water, and we're going to put the right amount of manure in at 10%, and that's going to be his holding tank. And so he's going to pump around the clock into that pit. He thinks he can get 40 to 70 gallons per minute out of his well. So we'll just pump around the clock. A week ahead, we'll just keep pumping and pumping. We'll pump manure, pump water in, and we're going to water fields that way. That pit will water 146 acres if he didn't add anything to it through the whole day. So he'll easy pick up the other 14 acres to get him to 160. We're going to water from fence row to fence row. And you say, well, Greg, how's it going to do that? Let's draw it. Because you say, well, if you only put 60 on with your planter, how are we going to get nitrogen on the whole field? Because it looks to us like the tire's going to hit the road and the boom's going to be 20 feet away, and that's correct. So we'll draw our 50-yard line. This is where that's going to be. Right here's your hydrant. So what's Greg going to do first? The first thing he's going to do is come down straight from the well where it's parked, and I'm going to turn and I'm going to do the headland. I'm going to come back. I'm going to do the headland this way, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to go around the well, and then I'm going to come up and do the headland here. At that point, now I'm just going to travel down my 50-yard line, and I'm going to start doing north-south and just go back and forth. I'm going to stop. Obviously, of intelligence, we know right where we watered. It's all RTK positioned. And so there's lots of features that we're talking about. We're talking about seeding, we're talking about fungicide, we're talking about manure, we're talking about nitrogen and sulfur. That's a no-brainer. Every acre that I do, every time we run, I have either boron or sulfur or nitrogen, 32%. I've got trials of P and K coming out right into the corn, and we're watering it in. Why does water work so well in a band? Because as the water goes down around that root, it takes in oxygen. What takes it for roots to grow? Oxygen. And so as our water percolates down, it's bringing oxygen down in that 12-inch band where all those feeder roots are. And I mean, when you look at the root system where rain has ran and you go over here 100 feet away where it's dry land and you look at the difference of the two, you say, I can't believe the size and the color difference. So the yield is real. So this coming year, we're going to have 10 units out running around. We had 6 this year. We'll have 10 next year. The engineers will be following all over the United States in different states. And in 2023, we're going to go into sales. So in 2023, we'll be full sales. Well, we appreciate you stopping by. Grab somebody with a white shirt and ask them more questions. Have a great fall. And thanks for coming in today. Appreciate it much.